Hello and welcome to another Divinity Original Sin video. This is a beginner friendly guide to building your own conjurer slash summoner. From the character creation screen, we're going to be covering gear, talents, presets, and attributes and school skills, etc. So in this particular video, I'm going to be covering the basis of 3 different elemental parties. So we're going to be trying to roll 3 into 1 here. So the summoner will play like a different role depending on the focus of the party. So whether it's a physical focus party, whether it's a magical focus party. So my suggestions would be different dependent on the elemental party that you're working with. And the 3 different elements that I'm going to be focusing on is a physical, a fire, and then a hydra slash aero. So firstly we're going to be covering the Pyro. Which race do I think makes the best Pyro summoner? I think the Red Prince is a very good option here. I think it makes a very good option because the Demonic Stare, even though I don't think it's particularly great, it does have more value inside of a magical party. And Dragon's Blaze can be used for burning your enemies. I don't mean literally the damage, but I mean more so for the fire resistance reduction. Other potential candidates would be, you could take Sibyl. Again, you're not going to get much value from the flesh sacrifice in terms of the damage, but more so for the AP. Ethan Benmezd and Losa can make for decent, adequate summoners inside of the Pyro party, because of the Encourage is a nice supportive buff. He does have Soul Wolf, but it's going to be relatively useless inside of this party. Beast is probably a no. Thane is an option. Thane's always an option because of the time warp. The amount of AP and power that you get from this alone makes some consideration for any role. But for me personally, I like to play Red Prince as my summoner, or perhaps one of the humans. But inside of the Pyro party, I like it to be Red Prince. Now, the preset does have a bearing on 2 things. As you can see, Red Prince is holding a shield, and I think that's a mace. So basically what this means is that these 2 things will be inside of the chest on the Merryweather at the beginning of the game. The other thing this has a bearing on is when it comes to character recruitments. If you recruit a character with the Conjurer presets, they will come with these spells. So just bear that in mind. In terms of the preset itself, now again, my answer will be very different dependent whether you have mirror or not, and of course it's all very much gear dependent as well. For all my responses and answers, just consider that I am playing with the mirror and I can change this and alternate this depending on my gear. But here I would probably look at, from the beginning of the game you will not need any strength, finesse or intelligence. See, because all of these do not add towards your summon. So they're almost dead attributes. The only time you will consider putting points into these is to simply meet the requirement for gear. That is the only time you're going to consider this. Constitution's a bit of a dead stat, but for a summoner, there isn't really too many other options for you to pick from. Memory, for the most part, is going to be your primary stat here. And it's not me saying just to dump points into it willy-nilly, but because you are going to need a lot of spells and spaces to use all of these. Wits also is very important for this role. Typically the way I play my summoners is I like them to go first and act first in combat, so Wits allows that to happen. The great thing about having a summoner be your initiative character is that it doesn't take any power away from your character itself. So, as I've already said, these three stats are only for gear. They're not going to affect our damage. So we have more points to play with freely to, say, add more points into Wits. Whereas if, for example, you didn't have a summoner, you would have to take points away from, let's say, your ranger. If you wanted your ranger to add first, you would have to take points away from a damaging stat in order to make that happen. With the summoner, you do not need to worry about that. So, again, this is all very dependent on your gear, whether you have the mirror or not. But personally, how I just start off from character creation screen is something like this. 1 in Wits, because I can go first on that, and then Constitution as a dumb stat. However, once you get to level 2 and get to the main islands, you can put as many points into memory as you want because you have more access to skills at that point. So it's very hard to pin down precise placements for your attributes. Basically the rule is this: you want enough points into Wits to go first, you want enough points into memory to get the spells that you want, and any future points you put into Constitution. If you want a piece of gear that requires 11 strength, and that's really good for you, you're going to put 1 point into strength at some point. So it's all very much dependent and subjective as to what you come across during the game. In terms of your gear though, you're going to be looking for points primarily in, I would say, Wits or summoning. But because you're a little bit of jack of all trades, getting points from gear that will help you meet requirements is also desirable. So again, this very much depends on the spells that you find and that you want to use. So you just need to meet the requirement. So for example, if I wanted to get Peace of Mind and Haste, which is in the Pyro kinetic tree, you need 1 point for it. 1 point from gear into Pyro would be quite a nice thing. Civil abilities we're going to completely ignore. You are free to choose whatever you want, whatever suits you. I'm not going to be covering that here. In terms of points from the get-go, I personally would go summoning and Pyro from the beginning, being that it's a Pyro based party. The reason I will go over it very, very shortly. But before I get to that, throughout the game, I would suggest there's two courses of action you can take. You can try to maximize your summoning as quickly as possible, and try to make your summoning as powerful as you can, or you can go a bit more of a utility based and rely on your 3 other party members in order to do the damage whilst you assist them. Either playstyle is viable. I personally like to play the utility role with the summoner because the 3 damage dealers is more than enough. But one thing I do actually really want to point out, and it's really really important, and it's a common mistake that I see people make, is once they hit 10 summoning, then they stop. The key for summoning to stay strong is to keep putting points into summoning and max it out and try to increase it as much as possible. For the skills, we're going to be looking at the Conjured Incarnate. I would personally look at a Totem, and then you can either go Ignition or Searing Daggers. This works perfectly fine from character creation screen. What you get is you get a Conjured Incarnate. You can create a Fire Incarnate because of your Flame Breath. You have the totems to support with damage, and then you have Ignition for the burning effect on in a large radius. In terms of talents, I personally like to take Glass Cannon from the beginning, though I think taking something like Torture is perfectly fine. But the reason why I would choose Glass Cannon is because from like the very very early levels, a lot of the enemies do not have a lot of magic armor, so you can pierce through and get that burning down with relative ease without needing Torture from like levels 1 to 2. So that's how I would look and build and set up for a Pyro summoner. If I was going to be in a physical party, I would highly suggest one of the humans. I probably would look at something like Ethan Ben Medst. Now personally, I don't really find the Soul Wolf all that useful, but he has more relevance inside of a physical party because he does physical damage. Also, I think Ethan is more relevant because Encourage plays a bigger role for your future totems, but that is much later in the game. Again, everything else is pretty much the same. The only difference from the combat abilities that I would be looking to put 2 points into summoning instead. And I will be looking to take on Farsight. So this is what my summoner would look like being inside of a physical party. Again, I would go Glass Cannon. If I was playing inside of a Hydra Aero party, personally I would go with Beast. Reason being is a little bit complicated, but I would first be maximizing my summoning, and after I maximize my summoning, I would maximize the Aerophurge to increase the damage of Blinding School. The good thing about this is that Blinding School does not require you to have any points into intelligence for it to be strong. So I can effectively have a non-damaging character do some pretty good damage with one of his specials. That's my thinking behind it. And with the Water Hydro summoner, I would again look at 2 summoning, and I would also start off with these skills too, and I would also start off with Glass Cannon. So as you can see, it varies slightly dependent on which party you're involved in, and that just continues to grow throughout the game. So with a physical summoner, you are typically going to be focused on more physical stuff. Pyro, you're going to be focused more towards fire. Hydro Aero, you're going to be working towards Hydro Aero things, so you're complementing each party dependent on which party we're talking about. So with the summoners, you don't You don't always build them the same way. You always build them in a way to complement who you're playing with. But anyway, hope this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.